This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we're going to be roaming all over different lands, sometimes in an underground dungeon, other times above ground, going through different ruins, hopping under gates, hopping up on high points, trying to take out some people from the other factions, and trying to get our own shards. Today we're taking a look at Wildlands. This is the latest game from designer Martin Wallace, and it's published by Osprey Games. This is a 2 to 4 player skirmish miniature games, but I would like to say this is more like a capture the flag game. This is very different from things that I typically enjoy, so let me show you, how the game is played, and then I'll see you on the other side. At the beginning of the game, each player gets to select one of the 4 asymmetrical factions. They'll take miniatures and a deck of cards specific for that faction. This one is the Nomads. Now they're not particularly tough, but they're fast, and it makes them a flexible force, and they do well when they stick together. Now this is the Lawbringer faction, and this faction's really good in fights. And these are the pit fighters, and they're extremely dangerous up close. They're great with melee combat. These ones are the Guild of Mages, and they're powerful but fragile spellcasters supported by Lunk, who's their mobile librarian, and they seek to hoard and protect rare magic. Some of them can actually fly. So once you've selected your faction, you'll get a certain colored base that will go on all your faction miniature members, and they'll each be lined up with the corresponding character card. This shows you how much health each of your different people have in your faction. Now through a drafting process, you're going to get some location cards. These are going to have numbers on them. I'm going to show you the board in just a minute, but what you'll be doing is selecting 5 of 10 cards in order to secretly select where these players are going to start the game out in the dungeon. Now after everyone has selected, they'll be passing the other 5 cards they got, and they're going to be putting shards of that player's color in the different numbered rooms. So as you see, there's 4 different colored shards because we're going to play with the total 4 players here today. And the object of the game is to be the first to get 5 points. You get a point for collecting a shard of your color. You also get a point for knocking out or making somebody else's character get to 0 health. And the numbers I was talking about, you'll see here. So those little cards I showed you next to the characters have these different numbers, and so that's where some of these were placed as well. So how the turn works in this game is you're going to be basically revealing one of your characters if they're not out yet, and then you're going to play some cards for actions that will be the next player's turn, and you keep going on this clockwise. For example, at the beginning of my first turn, let's say I reveal this. This allows me to place this character in spot number 40, and then play some actions. So that allows me to play this right here in the 40, and we can look and see I'm orange. I'm actually 2 away from getting a shard there. Now you can reveal more than 1 character if you want, but you have to reveal at least 1 if there's 1 off the board. Now I just brought this character card in here. This would be my hand of 7 cards to start the game. It'd be secretly in my hand, but I want to show you this. Every character has its own icon, which you might see on some of the other cards. So on these cards, you can use that icon to activate that character. If it's on the left side, you can kind of move or pick up those shards, which again are points, or you can use them for special actions that we'll go over later. This card's a wild card. It doesn't have any character, but you could use any one of these 3 actions for anybody you have on the board. So you can play as many actions as you want, one at a time. So I'm going to play this card for a move. That's what this little up, down, left, right is. And I can move that character. I would discard that card. So I would then move this 1 space here. Now the dungeon here has these white lines. That depicts a different room, but you can walk through it. But you can't walk through big things like this, that boundary, that. I could play another card, let's just say this one, and use it for movement, discard it, and I would move here. Now I'm in a room with a shard. In order to get it, you have to play 3 cards that have that character's logo on it, like this. 3 of them, I'm going to use it to pick up the shard. I would get this and put it in front of me. That would be 1 point. 5 points win this is the game. This probably wouldn't happen on the first turn, but I'm just showing you how the game works, what you're trying to do. And when you're done with that, you would draw 3 cards off the top to a maximum of 7. You can never have more than 7, and then it'd be the next player's turn. And that's pretty much how turns work. So let me go over some of the different actions. Now let's say it was this player's turn again on a subsequent turn, and this character, this would never be on the board, this would be in front of that player, but showing you that this is this character and it has a health of 4. Now let's say this player played a card like this. This allows that character to do a melee attack because they're in the same room as them. Now, this player, if they want to, they can immediately play a melee if they have this character's card on there in order to defend. So attack. So either a single or double melee can be defended, and then both those cards would be discarded. But if they didn't defend, this player would put a wound token on there. If this player just got its last wound token, this player would collect this. This player is knocked out for the rest of the game, and it's essentially a point for this player. But that's how you can defend like that. If you played this card, essentially it would do a double damage in the same room. So this one would take 2 damage unless they defended using the single sword card. Now another action is this one here. It is the ranged attack. This is this player's icon, and if they played that, they could shoot an arrow in a ranged attack straight with line of sight. Line of sight will go through these white lines that depict different rooms, but they can't go through barriers like this, but it could hit them if they didn't defend. However, some of the rooms, if they have a white number and a black, this room has cover, which means it cannot be shot through in order to hit somebody. Now, if they were here, they can be shot in a room that does have cover, but you can't shoot through a room that has cover. So they could not use that card to hit this person with ranged attack, because in between them, line of sight works with any part of this number touches any part of that number's core, and you can hit them. But in this case, there's cover in between, so you couldn't do that. Now, a double ranged attack allows you to do 2 damage to someone, assuming that you have line of sight. In this case, there's no cover, you have line of sight. But also, it cannot have more than 1 empty space that it goes through. So it can't be more than 2 spaces away, and you can do double damage. Now, both of those could be defended by a shield or possibly cover. So if that player was hitting that, remember that was a double axe player we were hitting, if they played this card immediately, after that player played that card, out of turn, they could play this and defend one of those. Or if they were in that room with cover that I showed, normally you can hit them, but if they play this, that gives them cover. Also, some cards sort of have some wild ones down here where it can be used for anybody. So any one of this player's characters could have been defended by playing that card. And there's one more attack type that's an area attack, and it does 1 damage to everybody in the room of that character, including that character, but this can be defended by a shield. So those are most of the different attacking, defending style actions. Another type of movement is called a rally. It's a flag. This is this player's icon. If you're in the same room or an adjacent room with one other player from your faction, you can move both with that one action. And you can even move either in the same direction or different directions. This one could move here, and maybe this one could move over there. And some characters have flight. There's 2 of them, I think, in the game where they can actually fly 2 spaces. Now on the back of those player aids, for each faction it shows you the distribution of the cards. For example, the faction I was using most of this time, they don't have any area attacks and nor can they fly, but they have a lot of rally. They're good at sticking together and they're not that strong. Where you look at this faction, they're really strong on melee, but they don't have any range and they're good at defense. Where this one has the magicians that can sort of fly and things, have lots of defense, lots of cover, so all of them sort of play in a little bit of a different way. Now, I want you to do the wild movement at the beginning. Another thing this card could do instead is to draw 2 cards. And another one is to interrupt, where you can actually, in the middle of a player's turn, in between one of their actions, you can play this and basically take a full turn, then it goes back to that player. So it's a way of interrupting a turn, and you'll use it for very tactical reasons. That's how the game works. As soon as some player gets 5 points, they win, the game ends. Again, a point is either getting a shard of your color or KOing one of the other player's miniatures. Now the board is double-sided. This is a more advanced board. It's above ground. It's the ruins, and it has some different things about it. For example, this little spot here, you can see the arrow. You can go actually underneath this little tunnel there. But it also has high points and low points. You see this double line with arrows? This means that this area is up a level higher, so is this one. But these ones are down lower, and this, it actually costs 2 movement to jump up there, and you have line of sight down, but people cannot shoot up there. So a lot of different ways to tactically have attacks and range attacks and things like that. All right, well, there is Wildlands. Now, I gotta say, this game very, very much surprised me. This is not typically a game that I would even walk by people playing, even if they were like, oh man, this is great, come check this out. I'm not typically a big miniatures player, and I'm not typically a skirmish player, and to see people going around and saying you're attacking and defending, I would have just walked right past this, man. Like, that's not for me. So I was very pleasantly surprised with this game. Spoiler, I absolutely loved it. Let's talk about why. The game is great production. The miniatures are awesome because they're not just that cheap looking gray miniatures that you see all the time. The ink wash that they did on this really gave the miniatures a lot of detail, and they just look and they feel heavier too. They're just really nice miniatures, and the art on all the cards and the characters and things like that is excellent. I love that this game has streamline mechanisms. I mean, literally, you're just bringing a person out and playing a card or multiple cards, and you're just moving, most of the time just moving or picking up shards or attacking or defending. That's it. It's very streamlined, and I like that aspect because even with that streamlined way of playing, the game has a lot of depth. I always talk about my depth to complexity ratio. This game is huge for that because the rules are simple, but there's a lot of depth on what you want to do. I love the card-driven aspect of this. I mean, yes, everything's happening on the board. Yes, you're moving. Yes, you're looking at where you're at. Do I have line of sight? Where's my shards? Where are my people? Can I get them together? You're looking at the board, but really everything is driven from your cards. This really is a card game that you're just trying to get the right cards, play the right cards at the right time. Ooh, you're giving up different cards that you don't want to give up because they have a different action on it. So the card-driven aspect of this I absolutely love. I typically like card-driven games. This one does an amazing job with that. It's all about hand management. It really is, because all the cards have multiple things on them. I like multiple use cards. This has that. And it's always like, man, this card, I needed to move this person here, but on this it has a range to attack for this other player who I could use next turn too. And you are constantly given these tough decisions and balancing. There's always a cost. You're doing one thing, but there's 2 or 3 other things on that card you're not able to do because you're using it. And I think that's awesome. And it just makes every decision in this game very tough, even from the very beginning. The setup, I kind of went over it a little bit in the overview, but man, this game, even from the setup, there's strategy. Where do I put my players? Where do I put them? Where am I putting the other players' shards? What do I want to do? There's lots of strategy even from the beginning. Now, the game itself, I like that it has sort of the wild cards that you can play and just do like a wild movement, or draw 2, or interrupt. The interrupt thing is really interesting because you can really mess with people, interrupt their turn, start taking a turn yourself to maybe move your person away that's about to get killed. Or my favorite way to use interrupt is someone's doing some damage to somebody else, but yet you are there too, or maybe you're a space away and you can hit them with a range attack. And right before they make their last attack, you interrupt and you hit it and you get the point for it, and that's really fun. I like that you're trying to gain shards, but you can do it with your knocked out characters. This is a brilliant sort of catch-up mechanism that doesn't feel like a catch-up mechanism, because otherwise those cards would be worth less to you when people get knocked out. But no, you can use those for a knocked out player as long as they're all the same to get those shards, and it's just a brilliant way to keep the game moving once you start getting one of your figures knocked out, or multiples of those. This game is tense all throughout. Even from the first play, you've got a plan, you're trying to do it, you're watching what other players are doing, and it's just, man, I just can't wait for it to get back to be my turn again. And the game is so tense. The scoring is always very tight. It usually comes right down to the wire all the time. I like that combat is simple. Boom, I'm going to attack. Okay, I'm going to defend. Oh, I'm going to range attack. Oh, I have a shield. I'm going to do this. I'm in cover. It's just very simple combat. None of this, I mean, yes, sure, they have health, but it's not like, matching all these tables and formulas to see if you get hit. I like that it's very streamlined in that regard. I like the cover spots, that you can hide in those and play the sort of the cover defense. I also like that you can't shoot through cover with the line of sight. That's cool. It's pretty easy to understand. Now the back of the board, the ruins have those high grounds, which I also like, gives it even more strategy. You can shoot down on other people and it's harder to move up on top of it. This game really reminded me of another game that I never thought I would like or play, but I ended up loving, Adrenaline from CGE, Chex Game Edition. This reminded me a lot of that in a lot of ways, except that one's more like resource management, where you're going around to get cubes, to spend cubes, to load your weapon, to shoot the weapon, and don't get me wrong, I love that game. But there's a lot of iconography to learn, and you're referencing a weapons manual, where this almost is just so much more streamlined, but just as much fun. So it's cards versus resources. I really like this game. It's good at all player counts. I've played at all of them. 3 is definitely the sweet spot for me, but I would never turn this game down, and it's very good at all player counts. Even at 2, the board's very open, but you're going back and forth much quicker. You're getting more turns by the end of the game. And what we found is that like you can really just concentrate on a couple of things because not a whole lot's going to change on the board when it becomes your turn again. So you basically can plan your turn ahead, and then depending on what cards you get, you might change it. But it's a little bit more methodical, a little bit just me versus you. With like the 4-player game, it's a lot more chaotic, where a lot of things happen between your turns, and you might end up having one thing planned, but you might have to do something else based upon what other players did. Different people are going to like different player counts. I like them all. I would never turn this down a game of this at any player count because it's so fun. The 2-player game took us 28 minutes. I mean, that's awesome. We finished and we were like, wow, this last one was 28 after we both knew what we were doing. And we're like, wow, this did not feel like a 28-minute game. This felt like an hour-long game in a good way, meaning it felt like a full, rich experience. And the 4-player games lasted just over an hour, like an hour and 5 minutes. So it's really good, 30, 60 minutes. Okay, so I love this game, but there are definitely some misses here, and I need to talk about them. So first of all, the dungeon board, it's a little dark. Sure, I know that a dungeon's supposed to be dark, but I don't know if it's the coating on the board or what, but even under average light conditions, it's a little dark, hard to see some of the details of the board. Could have been brighter. My biggest beef with the game is it's really hard to tell, A, which miniature is where. Because you're looking and you're like, okay, well, this player's the orange player. I can see that. This one, some of them are easier to tell than others, but there's plenty of times where you're looking at that miniature and going, hey, which one is that over there? And you're kind of telepathing what you're doing because the characters' art on the cards they kind of match the miniatures, but it's really hard to tell when there's, a bunch of miniatures on the board. It's hard to figure out which one is which, even with the colored bases. So it's really hard to tell. I really wish there was a way to either have an icon on the base of the miniature, or there's just some way to tell the health amount. We tried using little dice, but some of the miniatures don't really have a spot, like the owl, you can't put a die anywhere on it. I wish there was an easier way to track the health, because that's really what you need to know. Not really whose miniature this is and what is it. You can tell by the color, but it's more like how much health does this one have, because I need to plan if I can try to, KO this one, The blue and green colors were much too close together. They should have done a red or a white or something like that for one of those two. Even under average light conditions, it's hard to tell the difference between the shards and the bases. Not sure why they made them that close. The number 6 and 9 are exactly the same, just flipped over. They're not any different. There's no dots, there's no underlines. And you have to be holding the map cards. And this is important because you're setting up where you're coming out, and you might think you're coming out to a 6, but it's really a 9. And the only way to tell is to look at the bricks. Does it look exactly like the other brick cards that you have? Very weird that they didn't put, a dot or a line. I just Sharpied mine because it almost ruined a game for us. So a little nitpick there. And the player aid shows a lot of good stuff, but it doesn't show how many wild quantities each faction have because they are different. And the box cover isn't as inspiring as the art in the game and as the game itself. It looks kind of, whatever. I think they should have done a more epic cover. Now, I said a lot of negatives, but this game's amazing. I love it. And despite all those shortcomings, it's absolutely getting a section on Serenade, because this game is amazing, and everyone I've played it with also believes this. So, Wildlands, Saxo and Serenade, here we go.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.